There was an old man who lived in a little cottage at the edge of town. People rarely visited him because he was very strange. He spent his days collecting discarded pieces of paper, old magazines and newspapers, and his nights carefully gluing them together to form elaborate mosaics. One day a young man from the village came across the old man's cottage and, overcome with curiosity, decided to take a peek inside. What he saw left him speechless. The walls were covered with mosaics, depicting fantastic scenes from fairy tales and myths. There were images of valiant knights, fierce dragons and beautiful princesses. As the young man gazed at the mosaics, the old man approached him and asked, "What do you think?" The young man, still in awe from what he had seen, replied, "These are amazing. Where did you learn to make them?" The old man smiled mysteriously and said, "I learned how to make mosaics from a talking raven. He was an enchanted creature who had the power to grant wishes." A talking raven, a wish-granting creature, the young man scoffed. "That's just a fairy tale." But the old man insisted that it was true. "He taught me many things, but he also told me that everyone has dreams that they discard and forget, and that if someone is willing to collect them and piece them back together, those dreams can come true." The young man didn't understand what the old man meant, so the old man took him to the window and pointed to a field full of sparkling shards. "Out there," he said, "are all the discarded dreams of the people in this village. They dream of becoming rich or famous, yet they abandon their dreams when they wake up and choose to live ordinary lives. Or sometimes they have a falling out with a loved one and give up on love, or they get sick and lose faith in their own strength. And all the time their dreams are scattered on the ground like pieces of glass." The young man looked out into the field and saw a piece of paper fluttering in the wind. It was a drawing of a happy family, and the young man suddenly felt a pang of sadness. He, too, had a picture of his family, and it was the only thing keeping him going through the hard times. His wife had left him years ago, and his son had followed her, leaving him all alone in the world. The young man turned to the old man and asked, "Can you really collect discarded dreams?" The old man nodded and said, "If you pick them up, I'll teach you how to put them back together." So the young man went out into the field and started looking for discarded dreams. He found bits of paper and cloth, old photographs and faded flowers, and carefully collected them, not knowing that they would become his new family. As the sun began to set, the young man returned to the old man's cottage with his finds. Together, they pieced the dreams back together, and by the next morning, the young man had a beautiful new picture of himself, his wife, and his son. From that day on, the young man and the old man became friends. The young man continued to visit the old man's cottage, and whenever he saw a discarded dream lying around, he picked it up and brought it to the old man. With each dream they collected, the old man grew weaker and the young man grew stronger. One day, the old man called the young man over and said, "It's time for me to go, but you must continue my work. Collect the discarded dreams of the villagers and give them back to their owners when they are ready." Then the old man closed his eyes and passed away. The young man was sad to see his friend go, but he knew that it was his duty to carry on the old man's work. So he took the old man's place and continued to collect and piece together discarded dreams. And that is why, my friends, we must never give up on our dreams, no matter how old we are or how difficult things may seem. With a little bit of hope and a lot of hard work, we can make our dreams come true. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Once upon a time in a faraway kingdom, there lived a young prince who was known throughout the land for his bravery and daring adventures. But despite his reputation, there was one thing that terrified him more than anything else, and that was the thought of losing his friends and family. You see, the young prince had a shadow, and not just any shadow, but a shadow that grew darker with each passing day. a shadow that whispered terrible things to him in the dead of night, a shadow that seemed to grow stronger with every kind word he spoke and every good deed he did. The shadow told the prince that one day it would grow so big and powerful that it would engulf him completely, and then he would be no more. The prince tried to ignore the shadow's warnings, but the more he tried, the bigger the shadow seemed to get, and soon it became clear to him that if he didn't do something to stop it, the shadow would eventually consume him entirely. So one day, the prince decided to outrun his shadow. He ran as fast as he could, but the strange thing was, no matter how fast he went, his shadow always stayed just out of reach, like it was mocking him. The prince didn't know what to do. He couldn't outrun his shadow, and it was getting darker by the day. Just when he thought all hope was lost, he remembered an old legend that spoke of a magical land where shadows had no power. The legend said that if he could find this place, his shadow would become harmless, and he would finally be free from its grip. So the prince set off on a quest to find the magical land. On his journey, he met a wise old woman who told him that he could find the land of shadows only by crossing the river of tears. But the river was guarded by a fearsome monster, and many brave souls had tried to cross it, only to be turned back by its terrifying roar. But the prince was desperate to escape his shadow. So he thanked the old woman for her help and set off to find the river of tears. When he finally came across the river, he saw that it was indeed guarded by a fearsome monster. The monster had huge claws and teeth and eyes that glowed red in the darkness. It let out a deafening roar that shook the ground beneath the prince's feet. But despite his fear, the prince knew that he had to cross the river. So taking a deep breath, he jumped into the water and started swimming towards the other side. The monster saw the prince swimming away and became enraged. It roared again and whipped around, sending huge waves crashing towards the prince. But the prince was determined to escape his shadow, so he kept swimming with all his might. And finally, just when he thought he couldn't swim any longer, he reached the other side of the river. He looked back to see if the monster was following him, but it didn't even try to come after him. The prince had outrun his shadow. He had found the magical land where shadows had no power, and as he stepped onto the land, he felt lighter than he ever had before. He was finally free from the grip of his darkness. And so, my dear listeners, the boy who once feared his shadow the most became the bravest prince the kingdom had ever seen. Because when we face our fears and overcome them, we become stronger and braver than we ever thought possible. A writer finds a pen that could change everything, but it only works when writing about other people. He was a writer who had lost his inspiration. He wrote books about faraway lands and magical creatures, but he had lost his purpose. He had lost his reason for writing. And as the months passed by, he grew more and more bitter and angry and depressed. One day he decided to go for a walk in the nearby forest. As he walked along the path, he saw a small clearing, and in the center of the clearing was a small cottage made out of twigs and leaves and moss. And as he got closer, he noticed that the front door of the cottage was slightly ajar. He knocked on the door and a voice from inside said, "Come in." He pushed the door open and stepped inside. In the corner of the room, he saw an old woman stirring a bubbling cauldron. She turned around and smiled at him and said, "You must be the writer. I've been expecting you." The writer was shocked. He asked, "How did you know my name?" The old woman simply smiled and replied, "I know things. Come closer, writer, and I will give you a gift." The writer approached the cauldron, and the old woman dropped something into his hand. "It was a silver pen," she said. "This is no ordinary pen. This pen can change everything. You see, writer, your gift is not for yourself. Your gift is for others. But you have forgotten that. You have forgotten that you are a writer and that your stories have the power to inspire and uplift people's lives." The writer looked at the pen in his hand and then back at the old woman. He asked, "What do you mean?" The old woman said, "This pen will only work when writing about other people, when writing about their stories. Every stroke of the pen will bring their story to life. It doesn't matter whether their story is good or bad. With this pen, you have the power to change people's lives." The writer left the cottage feeling both excited and nervous. He didn't know what to write about. Suddenly, he remembered the old woman from the village who always seemed so sad. He went to her house and asked her if he could write her story. She agreed, and the writer sat down at his desk with the silver pen. As he began to write, the old woman's story unfolded before him. He wrote about her childhood, her hopes and dreams, her loves and losses, and how she had found solace in helping others. As he wrote, he could feel the old woman's sadness lifting and her spirit brightening. When he finished writing, the old woman was transformed. She was no longer the same sad woman he had known. She was happier, more cheerful, and full of energy. She thanked the writer for helping her find her joy again and told him to keep the pen. "It doesn't matter who you write about," she said. "All that matters is that you write their story with honesty and compassion." From that day on, the writer made it his mission to find people with interesting stories to tell. He traveled all over the country, meeting people from all walks of life. He wrote about their stories, their joys and sorrows, their triumphs and struggles, and how they had overcome adversity to find happiness again. With every story he wrote, the writer felt a sense of purpose and fulfillment he had never known before. He realized that his true gift was not the pen, but his ability to connect with people and help them share their stories with the world. And so the writer continued to travel, meeting new people and writing their stories until his dying day. His books became bestsellers, inspiring and uplifting people all over the country, and all because of a pen that could change everything, but only when writing about other people. The end. Once upon a time in a lush green forest, there was a tree. It wasn't just any tree. This was a grand old oak, the biggest and the proudest tree in the whole forest. Its branches stretched out like a king surveying his domain, and its roots ran deep, anchoring it firmly to the ground. As the years went by, the tree grew taller and wider. It watched the little saplings around it grow into mature trees, and it saw the shrubs and bushes change with the seasons. But the tree didn't bother with them. It was too busy being proud of itself. One day, a little rabbit named Hopscotch was hopping through the forest. She was on her way to visit her grandmother, and she was skipping merrily along. Suddenly, she stopped. She looked up at the big oak tree and said, "Oh, hello there, Mr. Tree. How are you?" The tree looked down at her and said, "I am the great oak, and I don't have time for small talk. Now get out of here before I change my mind about letting you hop away." And with that, he went back to admiring himself. Hopscotch couldn't believe her ears. She had never met such a rude tree before. As she continued on her way, she couldn't help but think about the tree and its silly behavior. "Being proud of your size isn't very smart," she said to herself. "What if a big storm comes along and knocks you down? Then what will you do?" Now, Hopscotch didn't mean to be disrespectful, but when you're small and a big bully tries to scare you, sometimes the best thing to do is to say something that will make them think twice. And that's exactly what happened to the tree. He started thinking about the storm. He had been through many storms before, and he knew that they could be rough. But he was a big, strong oak, and he always survived, so why should he be worried? But then he thought about something else. He thought about how much his roots had grown. His roots were so big and strong that they were no longer under his tree. In fact, They had spread out to the point where some of them were under the shrubs and bushes he had ignored for so long. And even worse, some of his roots were actually under Hopscotch's house. The tree felt a sudden pang of guilt. He had never paid any attention to the little rabbit that lived under his tree, and now he realized that he might have caused some problems for her. He decided that he needed to do something to fix it, so the next time he saw Hopscotch, he apologized for his behavior. And you know what? Hopscotch forgave him, and they became the best of friends. From that day on, the tree was a changed tree. He was still proud, but he was also humble. He knew that no matter how big and strong he was, he needed to be careful. He didn't want to cause any harm to the things around him. And every time a little rabbit or squirrel asked him a question, he answered them patiently. The tree had remembered where he came from, and he was a much happier tree for it. The end. Do you know a child who needs to be reminded to be kind to others? Share this story with them. They'll love it. This is the tale of the candle that quite literally blew up in my face. No, it wasn't a magic trick gone wrong. It was a demonstration of just how much one small thing can change everything. Picture this: a dark dystopian future where the sun has gone out and most of humanity has followed suit. People huddle inside their climate-controlled domes, wrapped in thick, protective clothing, only venturing outside in small groups for essential tasks. The year is 2142, and I am one of the lucky few who get to go outside for work reasons. My job is important. I am a historian. My task is to gather artifacts from the outside world before it's too late, to preserve as much of the past as possible. But today is a bad day. As we make our way through the deserted streets, our sensors detect high radiation levels. We hurry back to the dome, but it's too late. The radiation breaches our shields and kills 2 of our team. Fear grips the population. Should we seal ourselves in the dome and hope for the best? Or is this the end of humanity? I remember those days well, because I lived them twice. In both timelines, a small group ventured out into the wasteland to investigate the source of the radiation, and both times they found the same thing: a tiny candle. Its flame flickered in the radioactive wasteland like a defiant middle finger to the universe. And it changed everything. In one timeline, someone brought the candle inside the dome. The scientists studied it, reverse-engineered it, and created an artificial sun, reigniting the world and saving humanity. In the other timeline, the candle was deemed too dangerous to bring inside. They sealed it in a glass case and set up a perpetual motion machine to keep it burning forever. This time, humanity had a new purpose. We would study the candle to learn how to create our own light in the future. You see, the thing about a candle is that it doesn't require electricity or nuclear fusion to burn. All it needs is a tiny bit of wax and a bit of wick. And so when the great darkness fell and the sun died, the candle was one of the last things to burn. And in doing so, it gave hope to a dying world. In the first timeline, where the candle reignited the world, the flame spread quickly. Other candles were found, and with them, a forgotten art form was reborn: candle making. At first, people made their own candles by hand, but soon factories were up and running, cranking out candles by the thousands. Entire villages were lit up by these humble flames. For the first time in decades, the night sky was filled with light, and all because of a single candle. And in the second timeline, where the candle was locked away, its light became a beacon for the future. Candlelight became the currency of the world. Those who hoarded candles were the richest people in the world. You might think that's a dark metaphor, but it's actually quite true. In the present day, there are people who profit from hoarding candles. They know that one day their light will be the most valuable commodity on earth. You see, The thing about a candle is that it doesn't require much to start one, but it gives off a tremendous amount of heat. Just one candle can light up an entire room, and in the right conditions, a single candle can burn for weeks. The thing about a candle is that it seems fragile, but it's actually incredibly resilient. A gust of wind might extinguish its flame, but it won't stop the wax from burning. As long as there's oxygen around, the candle will eventually catch fire again. It might burn low, but eventually it will return to full strength. The thing about a candle is that it consumes itself to give light to others, but in doing so, it creates more heat than it consumes. That means that a single candle can not only light up the room, but warm it as well. So it should come as no surprise that the candle changed everything. The question is, what will you do with your candle? Will you let it burn out, or will you use it to light the way for others? The choice, my friend, is yours. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. It really helps us grow. Also, subscribe and share the link with your friends. So if you're brave enough, go check it out. Until next time, stay safe out there. Once upon a time, deep in the heart of the ocean, there lived a beautiful mermaid. She had a gorgeous, long, flowing tail, the color of which no one could quite remember, because it was so long since anyone had seen it. For the mermaid never went up to the surface, for she was terribly afraid of the sky. And since the sky was all there was above the surface, the mermaid was terribly afraid of the surface. For many years, the mermaid lived in fear, hiding at the bottom of the sea. But one day she heard the sound of a human voice and hid even deeper in the coral reefs. The voice floated down from the surface and sang of freedom, of the sun and the wind and the stars. When the song was over, a single tear escaped from under the mermaid's fin and floated up to the surface. Up in the human world, a girl about 12 years old sat on a rock by the sea. She listened intently to the sound of the waves. She, too, had a beautiful long flowing tail, the color of which everyone had forgotten, because she always wore a big puffy skirt. The girl, too, had been hiding for many years, though not in the sea, but in her own home. You see, this girl had once dreamed of becoming an actress. She had gone to the big city to try her luck, only to be told by a talent scout that he didn't like her face or her figure. "Go home, child," he said, "and don't ever come back." So the girl did go home, but she wasn't the same ever since. She couldn't even look at the sea without seeing a big fat zero that day. That's why, when the girl heard a sob in the sea, she couldn't just brush it off as some silly, childish fantasy. No, she knew what it meant to feel like a complete failure, and so she did something crazy. She took off her skirt and ran into the water. As soon as the water touched her legs, she felt a sharp pain, like 1,000 tiny needles pricking her skin. She screamed and wanted to get out. But then she remembered the face of the talent scout and dove even deeper into the sea. Down, down she went, until she could no longer hear the sounds of the human world. And there at the bottom of the sea, she saw a beautiful mermaid sitting on a rock. The mermaid had a gorgeous, long, flowing tail, the color of which the girl couldn't quite remember, because it had been so long since she'd seen it. For the mermaid never went up to the surface, for she was terribly afraid of the sky. And since the sky was all there was above the surface, the mermaid was terribly afraid of the surface. When the mermaid saw the girl, she asked, "Why have you come here? Don't you know that this is the home of the mermaids?" "I've come to learn how to be a mermaid," said the girl. "I've always dreamed of having a beautiful tail so I could explore the wonders of the sea." "But why do you want to be a mermaid?" asked the other. "Don't you know that we mermaids are cursed to live in this dark, dark water forever?" "I know what it means to be afraid of the unknown," said the girl. "I used to be terribly afraid of the stage, but I learned to overcome my fear and become an actress." The mermaid shook her head. "No, I am too afraid of the surface. I'll never be able to go up there." "Oh, I think you can," said the girl. "I really do. All you have to do is believe in yourself." Then the girl did something crazy. She took off her clothes and gave them to the mermaid. "Here, take these. They'll protect you from the sun and the wind." At first, the mermaid refused. But then she thought, why not? It's not like I'm going to be going anywhere. The girl then climbed onto the mermaid's rock and slowly began to take off her makeup. As the last bit of paint came off, she looked at the mermaid and said, "Now, do you see? There's nothing to be afraid of." And for the first time in her life, the mermaid saw the sky. She gasped at the sight of the bright blue expanse above her, dotted with fluffy white clouds. It was so much bigger and more beautiful than she had ever imagined. The girl smiled and said, "See? I told you weren't alone." Then she turned to the mermaid and asked, "What's your name?" I don't remember," said the mermaid. "I haven't been called by my name in so long." "Well, then I shall call you Sky," said the girl. "For you were afraid of the sky, but now you know that there's nothing to be afraid of, and besides, you remind me of the sky. You're as beautiful and as limitless as the sky above us." And so the mermaid, who was no longer afraid of the sky, became Sky, the friend of the girl who taught her that even when you ree at the bottom of the sea, the sky is still above you, and as long as you believe in yourself, you can reach it. Have you ever heard of a whispering wall? Years ago, I was working with a client who had just moved to a new village. She was struggling with self-confidence, feeling insecure and anxious in social situations. She would call me up and we'd be talking, and then suddenly she would stop mid, and I could hear this loud, clear voice in the background saying, "You're an idiot. What are you doing? They don't want to listen to you. Why don't you just give up?" At first I thought it was her inner critic, but then she told me that there was a wall in her village that did this. It would literally mimic and amplify your thoughts. One day she was walking through the village, and she was thinking some positive affirmations, and then she heard this beautiful, echoing voice behind her saying, "You are worthy. You are loved. You are enough." She turned around, and there was no one there. She realized that the wall was mimicking her thoughts, amplifying them, and projecting them back to her. So she started using this to her advantage. Every day she would walk by the wall and she would say positive things about herself, about her life, about her future, and slowly but surely, her reality started to shift. She began to feel more confident and secure in herself. She started to believe that she was worthy, that she was enough, and eventually her anxiety lifted and she was able to move forward in her life with confidence. This is the power of the inner voice. Our thoughts have a profound impact on our reality. What we think about expands. Whatever we focus on, whether it's negative or positive, will grow and manifest in our lives. This is why it's so important to be aware of our inner dialogue, to pay attention to the thoughts that we're feeding our minds. Think about it. When you're driving down the road and you see a house that looks like this, what's the first thing you think? That house is ugly. Or when you see someone who's more successful than you, what's the first thing you think? They're lucky. They got everything handed to them on a silver platter. Or when you're trying to accomplish a goal and you hit a setback, what's the first thing you think? I can't do this. It's impossible. I'm a failure. These are all examples of negative self. And if we feed our minds these kinds of thoughts, if we allow these beliefs to take root, they will eventually become our reality. We'll start to see ourselves as ugly, as unworthy, as unlucky. We'll believe that we can't do anything right, that we're destined to fail. But here's the good news. Just like the woman who used the whispering wall to her advantage, we can train our minds to think differently. We can override our negative self-talk with positive affirmations and self-beliefs. It won't be easy. It will take time and practice. but the results will be worth it. If we can learn to silence our inner critic and replace it with a more positive and supportive voice, we'll open ourselves up to a world of possibilities. We'll be able to pursue our dreams with confidence and courage. We'll be able to overcome obstacles and setbacks with resilience and grace. So here's my challenge for you. Take a moment right now to listen to your inner voice. What is it saying about you, about your life, about your future? If it's not what you want to hear, if it's not supportive and encouraging, then it's time to do something about it. It's time to start feeding your mind positive thoughts, to start believing in yourself and your abilities. It's time to start affirming your worthiness and your value. It's time to start seeing yourself as the hero of your own story. Because remember, your thoughts shape your reality. What you think about, whether it's negative or positive, will expand in your life. So choose to think positive thoughts. Choose to believe in yourself. Choose to affirm your potential. Choose to see yourself as the amazing person that you are. And if you need help doing that, reach out to a coach or a therapist. Someone can help you develop a more positive inner dialogue, help you silence your inner critic, and unleash the limitless potential that's within you. Once upon a time in a not-so-distant land, there lived a man who was so caught up in his work that he had no time for anything else. He was a true workaholic. One day, while scrolling through his phone during a rare free moment, he came across an intriguing ad. It read, "Are you tired of trading your precious time for money? Now you can buy hours from us and get more time for what matters most." The ad offered a way to purchase additional hours in a day by taking them from others who had extra time to spare. Intrigued, he clicked on the ad and found himself on a website where he could buy an hour for $10. Without hesitation, he bought an hour and pocketed it like a miser. From then on, he started managing his time efficiently, completing his tasks quickly so that he could log in and buy more hours. Every day he would buy 2 or 3 hours and slowly started controlling people's lives by making them give him their time. He became so engrossed in this that he forgot to enjoy the hours he had bought. He just kept buying more and more of them. Meanwhile, a young woman named Lily was going about her day when she saw the same ad on her phone. Unlike the workaholic, Lily had a balanced life. She worked hard but also made time for hobbies, friends, and family. However, she always felt like she didn't have enough time for everything, so she decided to buy an hour. After purchasing the hour, she noticed that it was really helping her, and that she still felt just as rushed as before. She went to a nearby cafe to relax and have some tea. There she met an old, wise woman who was sitting alone reading a book. Lily couldn't help but notice the tranquility that seemed to surround the old woman. Intrigued, she decided to strike up a conversation. As they talked, Lily mentioned the time trouble she was facing, to which the old woman replied, "Time is not something you can buy or take from others. It's a precious resource that we all have in equal measure. The trick is not to try and buy more of it, but to use the time you have wisely." The old woman suggested that instead of buying time, Lily should focus on using her time more efficiently, and cut out all the unnecessary activities that were just eating away at her day. She advised Lily to make a list of her priorities and focus on spending her time on the things that truly mattered to her. Touched by the old woman's words, Lily thanked her and went home feeling enlightened. From that day on, she started to use her time more wisely. She cut out unnecessary activities and focused on what really mattered to her. To her surprise, she found that she no longer felt rushed, and was able to do everything she needed to do without feeling stressed. Meanwhile, the workaholic continued to buy hours, but he started to feel unfulfilled. He had all the money he needed, but he had no one to share it with because he had taken all their time. He had become so obsessed with buying hours that he had neglected his relationships and forgotten about his passions. He had traded his life for money and success, but in doing so, he had lost everything that truly mattered. One day, the workaholic fell ill and realized that he didn't have anyone to turn to. He called up his family, but they didn't answer. He tried reaching out to his friends, but they all ignored him. At that moment, he understood the gravity of his actions. He had spent his entire life working and had nothing to show for it except a pile of money. As he lay on his deathbed, he looked back on his life and realized that it hadn't been worth it. He had chased success and wealth, but in doing so, he had forgotten to live. He had traded his time, his health, and his relationships for money and power, and in the end, it had all amounted to nothing. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a thumbs up and share it with your friends and family. And don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories like this one. Once upon a time in a little town lived a little girl whose name was Sophie. Sophie loved to rummage through her late grandfather's things. One day she found an old wooden box in the attic filled with all kinds of peculiar things like an old hat, a walking stick, a pair of glasses, and a pocket watch. Every day after school, Sophie would take out the watch and wind it up, but it never worked. Then one day, while she was winding the clock, she heard a tick. She stopped and listened. Tick, tick, tick. The old clock was alive again. Sophie was so happy. Then suddenly the clock started to glow brightly, and it spoke in a booming voice. "Who has awakened me from my slumber? Who dares to disturb my eternal silence?" Sophie was so scared that she dropped the clock. It fell to the ground with a loud crash, and the ticking stopped. As Sophie approached the clock, it started to glow again and said, "You have broken my casing, child. For this, I shall curse you. You will never be able to hear the sweet sound of birds singing, or the gentle flow of a babbling brook. All sounds will be painful to your ears." Just as Sophie was about to speak, a tear rolled down her cheek, and the clock absorbed it. "What is this?" asked the clock. "Why have you cried?" Sophie sniffed and said, "I don't want to be cursed. Please." The clock absorbed another tear, and this time it absorbed more of her sadness. "Is that what you want? To be happy?" Sophie nodded. "Very well," said the clock. "From now on, you will hear only pleasant sounds." And with that, the clock started ticking again. Sophie was very happy. From that day on, whenever Sophie heard the clock ticking, it made her happy. But there was one problem. Every time she wanted to wind up the clock, its hands moved backward. This meant that the clock would stop ticking until she wound it up again. And so Sophie's days passed without the constant joy of hearing the clock's soft ticking. One day, Sophie decided that she needed to do something about this, so she took the clock to a nearby town to get it fixed. The old clock repairer took one look at it and said, "My dear child, this is no ordinary clock. Its internal mechanism is made of pure magic. Only someone with a pure heart can fix it." Sophie thought for a moment. Suddenly she had an idea. She ran home as fast as she could and returned with the old wooden box. She opened it and took out the pocket watch. She placed it in the hands of the old repairer. He looked at her in surprise and said, "But this isn't a clock." She replied, "I know, but when I wind it up, it makes me feel good inside." The old repairer was deeply moved by her innocent words, and he took the watch and started to fix it. A few days later, when Sophie returned, the clock was fixed. She was overjoyed. She wound it up and it started ticking. But this time it was different. The clock didn't just tick, it sang. It sang of happiness, of joy, of laughter, and of love. Sophie danced around the shop in delight. She had never heard anything so beautiful. From that day on, Sophie wound up the clock every morning, and it sang to her all day long. The old clock repairer became a regular visitor at their house, and he, too, enjoyed the beautiful music. As the years passed, Sophie grew up and the clock continued to sing. One day, many years later, the old clock repairer came to visit, but Sophie wasn't there. He asked her father, "Where is Sophie?" Her father sighed and said, "She's gone, Mr. Clock. She doesn't believe in fairy tales anymore. She says the world is too complicated for that." The old repairer was deeply saddened by her words. He went into the attic where he had fixed the clock so many years ago. He picked up the old wooden box and took it home. He sat down in his chair and started to wind up the old clock. As the clock chimed merrily, the old repairer smiled. He knew that no matter how old we are, it's never too late to start over. The end. Once upon a time, in a faraway land, there lived a poor girl who had to work long and hard for her food and clothing. She worked from morning till night, and so she grew up with very little education. But the girl was kind and gentle, and that's why everyone in town loved her. One day, as she was walking home after a hard day's work, she saw a pair of beautiful red shoes by the side of the road. The shoes sparkled in the fading light like rubies. The girl hesitated before picking them up, because she knew that if someone saw her with those expensive shoes, they would accuse her of stealing. But since no one was around, she put them on and walked home. As soon as her feet touched the floor inside her house, the shoes began to glow. They were magical shoes, and the girl could not believe her eyes. The shoes started running all by themselves. They ran faster than the fastest horse, and they never stopped running. But the girl soon realized that the shoes would only run if she believed in herself. If she started doubting herself, the shoes would stop moving. So she tried again and again to make the shoes run. But every time she failed, the shoes would stop running and she would fall flat on her face. So the girl went back to the shoes by the side of the road and took them off. Then she threw them away and went back home. She looked at her worn-out slippers and sighed. Would it be wrong if she used some magic? Just a little bit of magic. That night, as she lay in bed, she heard a soft knock. She opened the door to find a tiny woman dressed in shimmering clothes standing in front of her. The woman introduced herself as a fairy and said that she was the guardian of the shoes the girl had found. The fairy told the girl that she had been watching her for quite some time now and was very pleased with the kind of person the girl was. So the fairy gave the girl a magic ring. The ring would make the shoes run for her as long as she wore it. The next morning, the girl put on the shoes and stepped out into the street. The shoes began to glow, and this time they ran without any effort on her part. She felt like she was flying down the road, faster than anything else. The girl visited the places she had always dreamed of seeing. She traveled all over the world in the blink of an eye, wearing those magical shoes. She was happy because now she didn't have to work hard anymore. The shoes would run as long as she wore the magic ring. But soon she got bored of visiting all the beautiful places. She wanted to do something more interesting. She wanted to experience something new. So she returned home. But once she was back, she realized how much she had missed her old life. She missed her simple house, her garden, and even her worn-out slippers. She had forgotten how hard it was to walk in the shoes without the magic ring. So the girl took the shoes off, threw them away, and put on her old slippers. As she walked out into the street, the shoes started glowing in the distance. The girl turned and saw the fairy standing there with a sad expression on her face. The girl understood what she had to do. She took the shoes, put them on, and started running. Yes, it was hard work, but the girl didn't mind. Now she knew that the shoes would only run if she believed in herself. And she did believe in herself, so the girl kept on running. She didn't stop. She didn't even slow down until she reached the end of the rainbow where a pot of gold was waiting for her. With the money, she bought a beautiful house for herself and everyone in town, and she lived happily ever after. Once upon a time, in a village nestled between rolling hills and a sparkling lake, lived a young boy. The boy loved nature, and he had a particular fondness for trees. He would spend his days playing in the woods near his home, climbing their sturdy trunks and making forts in their leafy branches. One day, while walking home from the lake, the boy found a tiny seed that had fallen from one of the trees. He took it home and showed it to his mother. "Can you plant this, Mama?" he asked. "I want to grow a forest, just like the one we have behind our house." His mother smiled at his enthusiasm. "Of course, my love," she said, "but you need to be patient. It takes a long time for a seed to grow into a tree." She showed him how to plant it in their garden and then gave him some water to help it along. Every day the boy would water the seed, singing little songs to encourage it to grow. But as days turned into weeks, the seed remained stubbornly unsprouted. Discouraged but determined, the boy continued watering and singing to his seed. He didn't want to give up on his dream of growing a forest. One evening, as the sun was setting, the boy was watering his seed when a wise old woman approached him. "What are you doing, child?" she asked kindly. "I'm trying to grow a forest," the boy replied, "but it's not working. I've been planting and watering this seed every day, but it still hasn't sprouted." The old woman looked at the seed and then at the boy. "You have faith," she said, "but you also need to be patient. Sometimes things take time to grow, and that's part of the process." She told him about a magical forest at the top of a nearby mountain where trees grew strong and tall in just one night. "If you have faith and are patient, your forest will grow too," she said, and then she disappeared as quickly as she had come. The next day, the boy continued his routine, watering the seed and singing to it. But now he was even more determined to make his dream come true. Each day he would climb the tallest hill near his house and look towards the mountain where the wise woman had told him about the magical forest. He wanted to believe that his forest could grow just as quickly, but he knew that it wasn't the same place. Still, he held on to hope and continued taking care of his seed. Then one morning, something amazing happened. As the boy was watering his seed, he noticed that the ground around it had become soft and moist. He dug in his fingers and felt something hard. With gentle persistence, he uncovered a small sprout that had emerged from the soil. The boy's eyes widened in amazement. He had been so patient and persistent that his seed had finally sprouted. Over the next few days, the sprout grew into a sapling, and the sapling grew into a young tree. The boy continued to water it and sing to it, and it thrived under his care. He planted more seeds, and watched as they sprouted and grew into trees. Soon, the boy's patience and faith had transformed his garden into a beautiful forest. Every day, the boy would sit under his favorite tree and remember the wise woman's words. He realized that sometimes it takes time for dreams to grow, but with patience and faith, anything is possible. And so, the boy continued to take care of his forest, knowing that he had created something truly special. And that's the story of the invisible seed. Do you have a story you'd like to share? Please do. We'll be happy to listen. Just like the boy who planted the seed, never lose hope. Keep trying, and one day you'll see the results of your hard work. That's all for today. See you next time. There was a man who had to cross a broken bridge. The bridge had many gaps in it, but he had to cross it because on the other side was his sheep. The sheep were in danger because some wild dogs had surrounded them. He started to walk on the bridge, but after a few steps he lost his balance and fell into the water. He struggled to get himself upright, but the water was freezing cold, so he quickly started swimming to the other side. As he swam, he thought to himself, "I'm not going to make it. This is too cold. I'm going to die." But then he thought to himself, "No, I have to be strong. I have to keep going for the sheep." And so he did. He slowly approached the other side of the bridge and grabbed hold of the first rock that he saw. He pulled himself up onto the rock and sat there shivering. He looked around to see if he could find somewhere else to go, but there was nowhere else to go, so he had no choice but to continue on the bridge. He took a deep breath, stood up, and started walking again. He put one foot in front of the other and slowly made his way across the bridge. After about half an hour, he saw another rock and decided to climb on top of it. As he climbed higher, he realized that the rock was actually a sheep. It was one of his own sheep. It had fallen into the water and gotten stuck on this rock. He tried to call out to it, but his voice was hoarse from all of the shouting that he had done while trying to get the sheep's attention. He knew that he had to do something, but he was scared. What if he fell? What if he couldn't save the sheep? What if he died? But then he thought to himself, "I'm not going to let fear stop me. I'm going to save this sheep and then I'll worry about myself." And so he jumped into the water. He swam over to the sheep and tried to grab hold of its wool, but the current was strong and kept pushing him away. He tried again, and this time he managed to grab hold of the sheep and push it towards the rock. Finally, the sheep climbed onto the rock and stood there bleating. The man was exhausted, but he knew that he wasn't done yet. He had to get himself upright and climb onto the rock as well. He started to climb, but his hands were shaking so much that he almost fell. But he managed to pull himself up and onto the rock. He looked down into the water and saw that there was another sheep stuck on a rock further down the bridge. He knew that he had to do something, but he was scared. He had just risked his life to save the sheep, and now he had to do it again. But then he thought to himself, "I'm not going to let these sheep down. I'm going to save them, even if it costs me my life." And so he jumped into the water. He swam over to the sheep and grabbed hold of its wool. He pushed the sheep towards the rock, and this time it was easy. The sheep climbed onto the rock without any help. The man was exhausted, but he knew that he wasn't done yet. He had to get himself upright and climb onto the rock as well. This time, when he looked down into the water, he saw that there was another sheep stuck on a rock further down the bridge. But by now, he didn't care. He had already risked his life twice, and he wasn't scared anymore. He jumped into the water and swam over to the sheep. He grabbed hold of its wool and pushed it towards the rock. Then he climbed onto the rock himself. When he finally reached the other side of the bridge, he saw that all of his sheep were safe. They had managed to get themselves out of the water and were now standing on dry land. The man was exhausted, but he knew that he had done something great. He had saved his sheep, and that was all that mattered. Do you know what the main point of this story is? Every success in your life will be a result of consistent actions over time. Let's say you want to become you won't become an influencer overnight, but you can set small goals, like posting one Instagram reel every day, and after some time, maybe 6 months or a year, you will see the results. So don't worry about the end goal. Just take one step at a time and believe in yourself. In a world where everyone was always talking, there lived a little girl who didn't say a word. Not a single word. She couldn't speak. No one knew why she was mute. No one knew what she was thinking. And so no one really wanted to be her friend. One day there was a school debate competition. As usual, the loudest and the most arrogant boy in class, Benny, was chosen to represent the school. He thought he was the best. Why? Because his voice was the loudest. He thought that being strong meant being loud. He was wrong. The topic was words can change the world. Benny shouted, "Stop for a moment. Let me tell you how words have changed my life." For the first time, they heard her say something. He realized that being strong wasn't about being loud or winning. It was about helping others and making them feel brave. He felt ashamed for judging Mary and everyone else who couldn't speak. He walked up to her and apologized. "I'm sorry, Mary. I never thought you could speak. I'm sorry I made fun of you." "It's okay, Benny," said Mary. "We all have our own strengths and weaknesses." She tried everything to get her voice back, but nothing worked. She took the princess to a hidden waterfall deep in the forest. The old woman told the princess to jump into the waterfall and that it would restore her voice. She wanted to share the good news with everyone. As she approached the castle, she noticed a huge crowd gathered in the courtyard. To her horror, she saw Benny, her former friend, standing in the middle of the crowd, addressing everyone. However, the water was freezing cold, and the princess hesitated. He wanted to marry the princess, only for her to become queen and make him king. Everyone gasped in shock and anger when they heard Benny's evil plan. He thought he had crushed it, but the princess quickly picked it up. With trembling hands, she opened the locket. Her voice soared through the air, echoing with newfound strength and power. Just when she was about to lose hope, she met a mysterious old woman who lived deep in the forest. She exposed his evil plot and reminded everyone of his cruel actions. The people became furious and turned against Benny. As the icy water enveloped her body, she felt a jolt of energy surge through her. She emerged from the waterfall and, to her amazement, she could talk. Her voice was even more beautiful than before. The people cheered and celebrated, thanking the princess for restoring their freedom. The princess understood that her true power lay not just in her voice, but in her courage to speak up against injustice and her determination to help others. The old woman was known for her wisdom and magical abilities. What matters is that we try to be the best version of ourselves. The judge was very happy. "You were saying, Mary? I think words are not always good. Sometimes our actions speak louder than words." He learned that being strong wasn't about being loud, but being there for others. And she learned that sometimes words do indeed change the world. Although she couldn't talk like other people, she expressed herself through enchanting melodies and harmonious tunes. Her voice echoed the emotions of her heart, touching the souls of everyone who listened. Like when someone is sad, you don't need words to cheer them up. You just have to be there for them. When someone is angry, you don't need words to calm them down. You just have to be strong for them. Without her voice, the princess felt lost and alone. People couldn't understand her, and she couldn't communicate with anyone. He talked about all the bad things he had done and how he had been punished for them. "But now I am famous in school, all because of my powerful words," he said. "Words are like swords. They can wound people deeply." Everyone clapped, but no one noticed a girl in the last row raise her hand. The day of the debate arrived, and Benny went on stage. "What's your name?" asked the judge. "Mary," she said, and everyone was surprised. Everyone looked at Ben. He shrugged his shoulders. "Well, being strong means being loud, right?" Everyone shook their heads. Then Mary continued, "When someone is scared, you don't need words to comfort them. You just have to be brave for them." At these words, she walked out of the crowd and went to the scared girl sitting in the first row. She put her arm around the girl's shoulder. The girl's face lit up with joy. "That's what I call real strength. Not being loud, but being there for others. That's what makes you a true hero. Not your words, but your actions." The whole audience stood up and applauded, even Benny. From that day on, Benny and Mary became the best of friends. Once upon a time in a faraway kingdom, there lived a beautiful princess who could speak only through song. One day, a wicked sorcerer cast an enchantment upon the princess, stealing her voice and trapping it within an enchanted locket. As days turned into weeks, the princess grew more and more desperate. The princess explained her situation to the old woman, and the old woman agreed to help her. Encouraged by the old woman, The princess took a deep breath and jumped into the waterfall. Overjoyed, the princess thanked the old woman and hurried back to the kingdom. He was boasting about how he had stolen the princess's voice and trapped it in a locket. Determined to stop Benny, the princess stepped forward and confronted him. In a fit of rage, Benny took the locket containing the princess's voice and flung it to the ground. Everyone watched in awe as the princess used her voice to break the curse on the kingdom. From that day on, the princess and her people lived happily ever after.